Hello, friends. Welcome back to Trending. Today, we're recording on Wednesday, July 17th. You're probably watching this on Thursday, July 18th. We're recording about 10:30 in the morning. So, we're doing a special Zoom edition today. So, Joe, greetings from my house. You're in the office today. So, greetings from a couple miles away.
Yeah. How's it going?
Doing good. Doing good. We're doing our
All
best
right,
to
man.
squeeze in Trending whenever we can. Summer, you and I are both kind of traveling over the next couple weeks. We were in France, and now you're going. You got a family vacation. I've got some family stuff, so we're kind of squeezing this in as we're able to. So we're going to record today. We're going to have to take next week off again. So thanks for being flexible with us as we have our summer schedule.
Yep.
So we don't have a ton of time. Should we just dive in, Joe? Are you ready?
Let's do it, man. Let's cannonball in, not dive in. Splash,
Okay.
splash time.
An opener. Okay. Well, Joe, it's obviously there's a ton of political stuff in the news today, this week. The RNC convention's going on. Obviously, there's the really tragic assassination attempt just a few days ago. So everybody's thinking about this. There's a lot of big, heavy stuff on a lot of people's minds. And Joe, you and I are always kind of in a pickle where we do our best not to talk about politics. We're not really trying to pick a side, or we don't talking about divisive stuff isn't really what we enjoy doing, not the goal of this show. But sometimes there's big enough stuff that we feel like we need to at least address it. So I've kind of got one thing I want to toss at you, and we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. But I
Sounds
think
good. All right.
the headlines that we continue to see is that on the right side, there's people who really like Trump, and then some people who really don't like him. Honestly, it's kind of the same on the left side. Some people like Biden, some people don't like Biden. And I was kind of paying attention to the some of the RNC headlines last night, and at least yesterday, kind of the theme of a lot of the speeches was, we know you may not like everything about this guy, but we're asking you to come around to be unified for the good of the party. That's kind of what the Republicans are saying this week. And honestly, it's kind of the same message on the left. Like we know you have concerns about Biden, we understand, but for the good of the party, the good of the country, we ask you to unify around this guy so we can move forward. So that's kind of the message I'm hearing is like, we know you're not thrilled about the choices you have, but we're asking you to come together in unity. And so we that might be as far as we go politically, but I think that's an interesting struggle that probably all of us have, right? Like we have things that we're really passionate about, but at some point we might have to put those aside for the good of the group, right? And I think you and I can probably think of examples even of our church. There's some things that maybe you and I either that we don't necessarily agree with, but we've kind of gotten behind because we want what's good for the church. And there's probably things like that on the other side too, that people will support us, even if they don't necessarily like what we're doing sometimes. Being on a team, being in a family, sometimes that's just what you have to do for the good of the group to put your differences aside. But knowing where to draw that line, where do we stand up for and what do we kind of sacrifice for the good of the group? That's a hard line. So I'm Joe, you're following a lot of this stuff too. So what's kind of the first thing that jumps out to you with that topic?
Yeah, I think so. If on the political landscape, it looks like they're trying to get their coalition together, the base, and they're trying to get all those who they can count on for November. And this is convention season, so what's kind of interesting, I think, about a political convention is that it's really like the party doing their business. All the states coming together and officially, turning in their delegates and stuff like that, and then hearing speeches from major leaders and some human interest stories and some even celebrities getting like their word into. And I think it seems to like the primary audience is obviously the people in the room. There's great fanfare, great enthusiasm that can be felt like in the room, and then there's cameras in the room, so we get to hear sound bites and stuff. And it seems like all the late night hosts are doing live monologues afterwards, and they're like giving comment and stuff like that. And so sometimes when you think, okay, when you hear appeals to unity, are they really asking for everybody? Is it everybody who's watching on TV? Is it anybody who's like listening to the commentary later, or are they shooting for just the people in the room? And obviously, that's got to be a given. They need to all get together as a party on both sides in order to have great momentum, towards the effort in November, in order for the party to be successful and to win. And so you're right. At some point, there I think it's quite healthy for political platforms and people within them to disagree and to debate, and because I think that helps to fine tune your your platform, the issues that you want to focus on and stuff. But at some point, like you have to look at each other and say, All right, is this not just good enough to get by, but is this, strong enough? Or are we with each other to try to do something together? And that just might be the natural function of communities, but also that seems to be a sign of maturity, right? Like I just find that the older I get, the less I really want to like battle every, fine piece of information. And what I've noticed about the wise and the healthy people older than me is that they learn contentment. They kind of figure out what is enough in regards to sources that they have or agreement that they have with people, and they just have reasoned that you're not going to see eye on everything. And so
Mm,
maybe a sign of maturity then is to say, for now, I think that we've had our opportunity to try to compete against one another. Now it's time to embrace one another so that many of the general things that we're after together that we can try to work on together. And so maybe that's going to be the interesting split screen that I'm going to look for as a voter for November is which one of these platforms I think is using sound logic. I mean, that should be a given. Who can winsomely articulate the values, the things that they're going to emphasize if their party is in power, and then who's the mature ones, right? Like who are the ones who aren't going to be petty? Like who are going to be the ones who can show that they've got great stamina, great patience, great clarity and logic? Because we only know what we know now. We don't know what the world's going to be like months from now. And I
mhm,
think a sign of leaders that they're able to deal with the unknown of the future is if they show like fruit of maturity along the way here. And I think part of that is not to just throw down with every single thing that comes up in a matter of difference. And so we see in the scripture sometimes that some of the great, vivid stories are when people can try to dwell together in unity. I think one of the harder stories about that, maybe on the other side of the coin, is the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11. I think it's meant to be like the anti-creation story. So this is what scholars like Walt Brueggemann and others have said is you look at Genesis 1 and Genesis 11 kind of as bookends to a big section of scripture to where like there's like a great balance, a great harmony in Genesis 1. There's like this great disunity, disharmony, where it seems like the people of the earth are trying to build a tower to box God out of creation. And so God grieves about this. At the end of that story, God confuses the languages, people are scattered. And it's like God saying, if this creation project is going to endure, we're going to need to get some difference in the communities so that they can learn the proper way to be human again because they're trying to push God out of God's creation, right? So that's
mm,
probably a negative thing. But what was neat about that story is the content that I've read is that people would reflect on that story at given times throughout their holiday seasons. And one of the times in which they brought that story back out was on the Feast of Pentecost, which is kind of a cool thing when you think about Acts chapter 2, which is a great story of unity. You have 120 disciples of Jesus in an upper room. They're waiting to see what Jesus wants to do next. And there's a diversity of tongues like Genesis 11, but
mm,
it's not bringing dysfunction. It's not bringing confusion. It's actually bringing great clarity. And
mm,
it seems to be like the bringing together of the peoples, where Genesis 11 was the dispersion of the peoples. And so I think that unity is something that God prizes. I think it's something that when we seek it, it's something that honors God's name. It seems to get close to fulfilling the petition of Jesus and John 17 to try to reason together, to settle differences, and to say, yeah, I'm willing, even though I may not agree with you, I'm willing to continue the conversation so that God can be honored and that human life can flourish because of it. I think this is one more note. The Greek word for peace is irene, and the root word of that is the verb iro, which means to join together. And so the biblical idea of peace, at least in the New Testament Greek,
mhm,
is this idea of it's not like an absence of pain or division or hurt, but it's actually the evidence of it And instead of like parting ways from one another, we've settled. We want to repair the difference. We want to see it mended,
Hmm.
so that we can continue to journey together. We're not going to bring it back up and throw it in each other's faces,
Hmm.
but we are going to seek God's help so that we can be joined back together and then we can go on for the future. And we see a vivid picture of this. Paul's attempt at this in the book of Philemon in the New Testament, where Paul's friendship with Philemon and his friendship with Onesimus sets
Hmm.
up this wonderful moment where Paul is trying to broker forgiveness between a couple of his friends who are out of sorts with one another. It's a vivid idea. It's something that's hard to earn because of the hurt and pain involved a lot of times in division. But if we can manage it and settle and learn to live in mature and healthy ways, it does adorn the gospel. Like
Hmm.
people see it as a praiseworthy thing, and
Yeah.
so it's worth pursuing if we can, with the grace that God provides.
Yeah. That's really good, man. Thank you for that context. I like that a lot. One more question I'll toss to you before we kind of wrap up here. So I think one of the great things about America, about churches, as we have kind of this fine line or this balance of unity and diversity, right? They're both important. We need diversity and we need unity. They're both important, and that's where the rub comes, right? When those things are kind of coming up against each other. So I think we've talked about before the idea of being united. It does not necessarily unity doesn't mean uniformity, right? I think we've talked about that a little bit. Can you flesh out that idea a little bit and what that might mean for us today?
Yeah, and so Pastor Andy sent something to our lead staff team. He's working on kind of a bigger idea with some policy stuff, and he's been kind of going out there in church world to see some great content to be inspired by. And there's a church that he found. They were writing a statement about whether women should lead in church or not. And
Mhm.
the great thing about this paper that they drafted was it's like 25 pages long. They seem to cover their bases. They seem to explain themselves and digress because it's a divisive issue still in the modern church. And they give at the end of the statement a taxonomy for the sake of unity. And they say that there's a time when we need to ask you to subscribe to something. There's a
Mhm.
time that we need to ask you to affirm something, and there's a time that we need you to respect something. And so those are
Yeah.
like kind of lower levels of commitment.
Hmm.
And I think that we should have that in mind as we are trying to settle differences with people, maybe just one to one or in a group. So when a group is working on something and we just may not be on the same page,
Hmm.
we need to ask by saying, could I respect their perspective after all of our discussion? And if we're
Yeah.
just not there, then I think that's kind of like step one. Like that's like getting on the path together. And so if we can't respect the decision, then we probably need to seek more explanation. We may have our perspective articulated a little more clearly so that they can hear our side. Okay. But if we can respect it, then we got to stretch a little bit further. Can I affirm, what
Hmm.
they're doing? And maybe we can't,
Yeah.
but maybe it's good enough that I respect their decision. And in most cases, it's good enough to get by,
Hmm.
right? But the ultimate like unity is, can I subscribe to this? So not
Yeah.
just respect it and affirm it, but can I subscribe to it? Can I
Yeah.
like champion it, and can I be an evangelist for the idea and the cause, as we try to get consensus into a wider group? And so I think that would be the thing that it's a new thing that's been given to me that I'm trying to use is start with, can I respect what's going on here? And
Hmm.
if I can't, then maybe that's an indication that it's time to part ways respectfully, ironically there, or it's maybe a time to try to talk further so that I can come to that place of that initial respecting of the decision. So,
Yeah. I like those three levels a lot too. That was helpful when I heard him explain that too. Very good and
yeah,
timely ideas for us to process. So
yeah,
we're going to be in
yeah,
a wild ride, man. The rest of this year is going to be chaotic. So I just hope that you and I, Joe, Ridgepoint Church, anyone who's watching, like again, I just put out the plea, like let's just be peace people. Let's be loving people. Let's be unified people. Like I want to
yeah.
be in the midst of all the craziness. Like what if Ridgepoint was a shining light in the midst of all the chaos, right? That's my heart, my goal. I just hope that we can be the kind of people who stand out from the mess of the culture around us. So those are some helpful pointers.
Yeah, and I think it would be so I'm just working on the message for Sunday, and in Philippians, Paul's going to talk about living a life worthy of the gospel.
Yeah.
And the gospel shorthand definition is good news.
Hmm.
And wouldn't it be good news if there were a tribe of people that just didn't get so amped and animated and hot takey, um, about everything? Surely, if there are certain things that we have to like really grapple with because it means a lot and vulnerable lives are at stake, and yes, absolutely, let's escalate it
Hmm.
and let's be the people who are animated by that. But it doesn't have to be everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be every headline. It doesn't have to be every, talking point. And so it would be good news, and I think a breath of fresh air for the world around us, the watching world around us, if we could somehow be more disciplined and mature about in regards to some of the vitriolic issues that we have in the world around us. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very good word.
yep,
All right, man. Well, that's good. Thanks for that insight there. Very helpful.
yeah,
Appreciate
yeah,
your
man,
your insight
it's a
there.
good topic. Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
As I mentioned, we're going to be off next week, and so apologize in advance. We won't be here next time. We'll hope just to catch you in 2 weeks. Joe's preaching on Sunday, so if you're around locally, of course, we'd love to have you in the building, or you can check it out online if you'd like to continue our Philippians series with us. We'd love to have you. Any closing thoughts, Joe?
Man, this was getting towards the end of summer, and I've been spending some time with parents of kids, and it seems like everyone's trying to squeeze in last memory making opportunities and prepare for school. So there's a good chance the person who's maybe driving a bit inattentive around you is not just TikToking on their phone. their,
Yeah,
their mind's probably full. So let's give grace to one another, and hopefully we can get each other through the summer as we prepare for the new school year, and that we can be an encouraging presence in people's lives around us. So,
yeah, I like it. All right, Joe. Well, thanks to you. Safe travels to you. Have a good trip with your family next week, and we'll look forward to seeing the rest of you either on Sunday or when we're back the following week. So thanks for your
yeah,
time today. Have a good
likewise.
one.
Yep. See you next time.